Hi everyone, welcome to this video on the Wara channel. Today we're going to talk about the different faces of God, okay, and how you, okay, as a deva, okay, can have different faces, okay, as well, okay, as a being, okay. So, first of all, you know right away, well, you have your face, right, in your body, right, because you're a deva in embodiment, right, at this level of your phase of life, right. You're at the first phase of your phase, or the initial phase of the four phases of life, right? You did life here, then you go to the Bardo, the Vaitarani River, right? Your second phase, you're still being judged. Then you have your moment of your judgment when you go on the bridge of God across the Vaitarani River, and then where you go after, right? That's your fourth stage again, which can be a cycle back to here, which can be a trip to hell, which can be off to heaven for good, and you can keep growing there, right? So you have your different phases and stages, okay? What happens is when we're talking about the faces of God, okay, the faces of God represent the different personalities of God, okay, the different elements of personality, okay. So different face is a different personality and also a different function as well. So the different functions. So essentially you would say the main functions, right, and the main representations, right, through a face of those functions, right. So basically when we're talking about, I've discussed how all of you as devas live basically in the green areas, underneath the mountains of the Himalayas, right? Kailash stands at the center, at the middle of the meeting place between the living people and the gods, right? And their functions and the physical representation of their function within the mountains of the Himalayas above Kailash mountain, right? And then you have the main gods, which have their marks on the mountain of Kailash, okay, and then around Kailash too, the big ones around there too, including the Siva, right, which is right beside Kailash and connected into Kailash through the Trajo, which plugs in, right, and I've discussed this extensively on this channel if you're interested in that. Okay, so the faces of God. So basically, when you're talking about faces, God has five faces. Okay, and basically, as an avatar, I have five faces. Okay, so when you look at the faces, okay, you have three faces on Kailash Mountain at the base and center of the north side. Okay, the bara, which was the flat head and the the half moon bottom of the head, the bara. Then the second face that was added on, the round face with the fire hair, right? The face that goes through the struggle, basically. Let's just call it that way, okay? And then basically that's Baram. And then you have the face, that's the triangular face that looks towards the bottom on the right there, and that's Savakasi, that's the scary face, right? Also known in many ways as that scary being, that scary face on the north side of Kailash Mountain, okay? That is connected to the Damaru, which is also at the center and base of, on the shoulder of Shiva Brahm. That's the name of the being, Shiva Brahm, one of the names, okay? And the Damaru is carved into the mountain on the north side, right? There you go. And then you have three of the faces of the being that holds the Damaru of Shiva. So the Shiva, right? That being the Shiva. And the story is of the Shiva, the Ra being Baram, Shiva Baram, right? And also the Sava, right? Basically, right? The Savakasi, and basically the story of that being, right? So actually the physical manifestation of that being that exists at the different levels, including the level where you visualize the Vaitarani River, the story of going up the indentation that goes up, if you look at the north side of the mountain, the indentation that goes up that north side all the way to the top of the mountain from the base, right? And that's the Vaitarani River. And Vara basically swims up, right? And becomes Shiva at the top, right? Becomes Shiva becomes Shiva Brahm. And then the story of the avatar is the descent back into the body, right? The descent back at that level of the god of the mountain, right? So God has five faces. So one of the faces is the Savani, the Marachino, right? That's basically beside Kailash Mountain. And then you have 3 on the mountain, and then you have the face of the avatar itself, which is the 5th face, right? So you have 5 faces to God, and that's how faces are explained, and what faces represent are different functions of the same being, right? So some beings have different functions. And beings always have a lot of functions, but essential functions, main functions, right, that they are basically in charge of, essentially, right? And those functions are represented within the mountains of Kailash, right? Since the area around Kailash Mountain is also represents all the operating system of creation and its physical manifestation of that operating system, right? So that's why you have the spine of creation there, all the different past creations that all connect together in interconnecting lokas, right? The 7 lokas. And basically you have it moving towards the 8th creation, which is the trident, right? The 8th, right? The number of yoga, the number of time, right? And when it's time, we move to the 8th creation, right? Which is the trident. And if you look from satellite view of Kailash Mountain, you see these streams of mountains, 7 of them, and the 8th one that is a trident from above. And Kailash right in there, you see that there's a differentiation in the area around Kailash Mountain from everything around it, even the other mountains behind it where the other gods are, the other deities, okay, the other devas, and their function, the mark of their functionality. Okay, so basically the mark that they can remember through yoga, right? At that point, if they practice Zen Wara and get to that stage, right? So people can remember their different faces, their different functions within the system by practicing yoga and advancing. And as they remember those functions, they can now at that point they essentially turn into gods on earth as they understand how to basically operate those functions that they oversee, right? And they do this basically under the guidance of their deity, that they practice with, or their god, or God himself, or what depending on, or their guru, or their and their teachers, the guidance of many people when you think about it, as we go about our lives, we get guidance from many people and many things. So it's a good thing to be open to guidance. So there are different faces to God. So God has 5 faces, right? And basically that are attributable to his direct functions, right? And those faces basically oversee many other different functions that have their own faces, right? So as a deva, as you yourself have different functions that you're responsible for, and you're living basically this life, this experience, but you're also existing at the level of different lokas, and what you're doing is you're a calculation communication machine, basically, that's operating within the system and is being given a life in a sense as well. It's the way of giving you a life, right? So you're being given an individual experience as a system that exists within a computer program, right? So basically the 8th creation moves to the trident, right? And everybody's a little bit worried about the trident. There's a lot of legends about the trident. We know the trident's it's an interesting one. So that's basically the day that the creation moves towards the 8th creation. The final step, the final shift, is the day that the sky goes red, right? And that the Shris reunite at Kailash Mountain to basically try to resist the change, right? But the thing is, do we move to the next creation? The Trajo is moving systems to the next creation in preparation for the next creation. We must not also be afraid of change, right? There is a greater purpose and a greater plan, right? So we are in movement, if you want to see it that way. You might have asked yourself, why are there 7 lokas? Why are there not 8 lokas, right? And that's because this one is basically developing, right, towards the shift towards the next creation, right? But what I've said is I'd rather, at one point we have to make a decision. Do we stay how we are, or do we seek improvement continuously towards the next final step, you know? And then basically we say, well, maybe we don't stay as we are, but maybe we can improve sufficiently as we are to not need to go to the next step. So I invite you to think about this. So there are different faces to God, and you as a practitioner of Wara, okay, can also discover faces that are attributable to you that'll be basically in the mountains, okay, of Kailash, right, somewhere in the Himalayas. So basically it'll get to the point where if you practice properly for enough time, you'll get to a point where you're going to eventually have enough information directly that you'll actually know the exact coordinates for you to go on a Google satellite search and to zoom in on specific coordinates and to see your face or where your face is located on Kailash Mountain and the area around. And it's not really that the seeing through the satellite view that's going to basically give you the information. It's what you're going to remember through your sadhana, through your practice, that's going to give you all the information. Okay, so you're not going to see maybe the mark of your face through that satellite view picture. It doesn't zoom in close enough, but you'll see something there, and then you'll remember everything. You'll understand everything because it'll be time for you to unlock that knowledge with the grace of the divine. So you'll actually remember if you have different faces, if you know, and all of these different things, you know. So that's very interesting. You know, and as a being that exists at a function, sometimes you're an embodiment, sometimes you're not an embodiment at different levels of your stages of phases of life, but you still exist as a function, right? And that function is manifested, right, in a physical manifestation in the mountains of the Himalayas where the gods live, and that function is attributable to a god, and you are a god, a deva in that, right? But you just have to remember that you're a being of God, and a god is a being of God, right? A being that gets the energy from God, right, and can distribute it to others, so that makes you a god, right? Under God, but a god nonetheless, a deity nonetheless, you know. So what is essentially the enlightenment of all humankind in a golden age is basically the invasion of the gods. Everybody realizes they're gods. And as such, you know, everybody needs to be treated right with universal income and all that, right? Everybody needs to be taken care of because you realize that we're all in this together, you know? And it's a wonderful story, you know, it's a wonderful tale, but we have to live it wonderfully as well. So there are different faces attributable to different functions, okay? And maybe you have one face attributable to a function, you know, and then maybe you have multiple faces attributable to different functions, okay? So go and discover your face, where it is, that function that you are, where is it in the mountains, you know, basically, and through your practice, that's just one of the little things that you'll discover. That's not even a big deal, discovering that, okay? That's just a small thing, but it's interesting. So know thyself, essentially. Practice Wara. Okay, so the different faces of God and basically how you have a function that's represented within the mountains of the Himalayas that's attributable to you, and you are a deva. Okay, don't forget that when you're having a low moment. Don't forget, I'm a deva. Let's have a good moment, right? You know, and a moment that can be proud of. Have a great day.